Thursday, December 7th, 2017. Diary of a Single Black Mother, Part 2. Zachariah's voice floated down the stairs, smooth and unbothered. What a guan, Miss Brown? His Caribbean accent wrapped around the words, disarming and confident, like he wasn't walking into a room thick with tension. I leaned against the doorframe, catching the faint crack in Miss Brown's polished demeanor, a shift in her posture, a flicker in her eyes, before she cleared her throat and straightened out her clipboard. She laughed nervously while answering, I'm doing well. I mean, good, she corrected herself, stealing a glance at me to see if I caught her slip. I did. I saw the thirstiness the slut had. Zachariah, of course, basked in the attention. You sure about that? He teased, leaning slightly toward her in that smooth way of his. I folded my arms and leaned against the wall, watching the exchange with mild amusement. He was laying it on thick, and she was eating it up. If only she knew what this fool was up on before she got here, maybe she wouldn't be so desperate, I thought. Earlier, I came home to find Zachariah sprawled out on the couch, drunk out of his mind. My babies were clean, but it felt like they were crawling out of every corner like roaches scattering when the lights come on, clutching the last of the chips they'd been munching on. The rage hit me so hard it took everything in me not to lay him out right there, what he'd always call a wicked box down. I was dead tired, sweat still clinging to me from a long shift and the grueling ride from the J train to the Q84, only to walk into this mess. And the worst part? He knew CPS was coming that day. All I had the strength left to do was scream, because if I didn't, I might have done something I couldn't take back. My youth, now CPS gonna take all your pick-me dem away. Zachariah jumped up screaming, burn down Babylon. I died laughing as he called Miss Brown a big fat mum pea. You'll go brush your teeth, my lord, before she smells the red stripe coming out your mouth. I finally screamed. I seriously had enough hearing fire bun and calling to his jaja. My final trigger was when he said, what type of place this is to bring up youth, me not grow like so. For some reason, every time Zachariah compared how he was raised in Yard to how kids are raised in America, it felt like a direct jab at my parenting. He'd always bring it up when my teens were acting out, and being that he wasn't their biological father, their problems automatically became mine alone. Sure, he tried to help here and there, but his efforts were inconsistent at best, leaving me to shoulder everything on my own. It was easy for him to criticize from the sidelines, but I guess he forgot that his own kids would grow into teens one day too. When that time comes, let's see if all his big talk holds up. It also bothered me deeply because I was a first-generation Haitian, born in New York, constantly made to feel like I missed out on some magical childhood they had back home. Haitians and other West Indians always seemed to hold this over me, like I was somehow less, like I couldn't understand the richness of their upbringing. Maybe their childhoods were magical, but let's not forget, they came to this country for a reason. That part of the story, they never wanted to talk about. It was easier to romanticize the past than to confront why they left it behind. Heading to the barber shop? Ms. Brown asked, her voice almost shy. Yes, is that okay? He shot back, still grinning. Of course, she stammered, waving a hand. I've already seen you, so I can finish everything else up with. She turned to me, her smile tightening. Your wife. The word wife rolled off her tongue like a stone, sharp and deliberate. Women always gave Zachariah an easier time. Even at the Caribbean restaurants, if I order oxtail, they give me one piece with a whole leap of rice. If I sent Zachariah, they'd hand him the whole damn cow. Even with this case, the state's focus was mostly on me, according to our lawyers. Why? Because I was the one in the bedroom when our 10-month-old Zainif got injured. It didn't matter that we were both responsible for raising him. It was like they decided from the start that I was the guilty one. To be clear, what actually happened was that he rolled off the bed. But according to the state's allegations, he was shaken, grabbed by the foot, slammed against a light switch, and purposely rolled off the high bunk bed in my son's room, all at once. That's right. They somehow pieced together every possible theory into one absurd narrative, as if all of it happened simultaneously. It didn't make sense then, and it doesn't make sense now, but that didn't stop them from tearing my family apart over it. Let me school you a little bit. CPS family court cases operate under a dangerously low standard of proof, often relying on hearsay and circumstantial evidence instead of the solid facts required in criminal trials. Unlike criminal cases, which demand proof beyond a reasonable doubt, CPS decisions hinge on whether something is more likely than not, basically, a flimsy game of probability. And if you share skin characteristics like my family, let's be real. Guess which side of that probability you're automatically placed on? It's a system stacked against you from the start, built on assumptions that have nothing to do with truth or justice. This system, designed to prioritize child safety, often sacrifices fairness, allowing rushed judgments that can devastate innocent families. Anonymous reports or biased testimonies can lead to children being torn from loving homes without the protections parents would have in criminal court. The intent is to protect children, but the reality is a flawed process that often punishes the wrong people. Without the right to challenge weak evidence or confront accusers, parents are left defenseless in a system where guilt is assumed and fairness is an afterthought. The stigma of CPS involvement can linger for years, making it nearly impossible for families to fully recover. I swear the only reason they zeroed in on me was because of how that interrogation went down. They had the Asian detective questioning Zachariah and the white man questioning me. And let me tell you, there's no way in hell she understood a damn thing Zachariah said. By the time I got out of that room, this man was laid up on a cot, asleep. Mouth open, snore and drool passed out, like he wasn't in the middle of a fight for his life, just chilling. I was sitting there sweating bullets, trying to explain myself, while he was knocked out, not a care in the world. And you know what? He had it figured out. He knew the game that my crying American citizen didn't know. Meanwhile, I thought telling the truth would set me free. I laid it all out, honest and raw, thinking, this'll be over quick. Nope. Every single word I said got twisted, flipped, and turned into something it wasn't. If I could go back, I'd tell myself one thing: shut the hell up. Because in their system, the truth doesn't save you, it buries you. And another thing that pissed me off: Zachariah and I were married, but his papers still weren't approved. The man had zero income, no legal rights, nothing. Yet somehow he was handed a free lawyer, no questions asked, while I, born and raised in America, had to pay for my legal representation out of pocket. As a nurse, I worked tirelessly, watching nearly an entire paycheck vanish to taxes, yet somehow he qualified for benefits I couldn't access. How is that fair? A system that seemed to prioritize his needs over mine, a citizen, felt like a betrayal. It was a harsh reminder of just how backward and unjust the system can be for those who are supposed to be protected by it. The U.S. justice system gives free legal help to undocumented individuals in cases like immigration or detention hearings, not out of favoritism, but because the 14th Amendment guarantees due process for everyone, citizen or not. Nonprofits and advocacy groups step in to assist those who can't afford it. Meanwhile, U.S. citizens dealing with civil cases are often left paying out of pocket unless they qualify for low-cost aid. Critics call this unfair, but the system argues it's about protecting undocumented people from unique risks like deportation or family separation. The real issue isn't about prioritizing one group over another. It's the lack of affordable legal representation for all low-income people. The system fails the most vulnerable, whether they're undocumented or citizens. This isn't about the old immigrants built this country argument. It's about fairness, and right now there's none of that to make it make sense. But to Zachariah, it was all just Babylon, his Jamaican way of saying, screw the system. Problem is, the system wasn't raising these kids, I was. And neither he nor his family ever appreciated that, not once. Now, watching Ms. Brown smile at him, I almost laughed. She thought she saw something in him, but she didn't know the half of it. I swear I wish she would take him. Any woman dumber than me, please take him the F away. As Zachariah slipped out the door, I caught her glancing at him like a schoolgirl with a crush. Would you like to see his room while you're here? I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Ms. Brown's cheeks flushed. No, that won't be necessary, she replied quickly, turning her attention back to her clipboard. Can we hurry this up, Miss Brown? I have dinner to finish. I was losing patience and had a strong effing desire to slam that damn clipboard shit on her double chin. She smiled, smug as ever. First, I just need to see inside the refrigerator. I stood there, flabbergasted, thinking, Sweetie, I'm Haitian. We've got rice on the stove. What exactly are you hoping to find? Hamburger helper and corn dogs? Sloppy Joes and Capri Suns? Get real. I wanted to laugh, the audacity, like my fridge held the answers to all her suspicions. With a dramatic swing, I yanked the door open. Go ahead. Cheese, broccoli, juice, oh, and breast milk. Want to examine that too? My sarcasm was sharp enough to slice through her smugness. What was the point of this anyway? Because if we're being real, with her big back, I'm sure she's hiding more Twinkies in her fridge than I ever could. The reason CPS supposedly inspects the contents of a refrigerator during home visits is to ensure that children have access to adequate and nutritious food, which is a fundamental part of their well-being. This practice helps assess whether the household can meet the basic needs of the child, including a consistent supply of healthy meals. An empty or poorly stocked fridge can indicate neglect, food insecurity, or potential mismanagement of resources. The practice of inspecting refrigerators during home visits has been criticized as potentially invasive and even racially or socioeconomically biased. Such inspections may disproportionately target families of color or those in low-income communities, perpetuating systemic racism and inequality. Historically, families from marginalized backgrounds have faced higher rates of surveillance and intervention from child welfare systems, often based on cultural misunderstandings or implicit biases about parenting practices. For example, in some cultures, food may not always be stored in a refrigerator, but rather cooked fresh or preserved using traditional methods. CPS workers unfamiliar with these practices might misinterpret an empty fridge as neglect. And trust me, these ignorant bitches will. Additionally, low-income families might struggle with food insecurity due to systemic barriers rather than parental neglect, making these inspections less about protecting children and more about penalizing poverty. Such controversies highlight the need for cultural competency, sensitivity, and systemic reform to ensure that these inspections serve the best interests of all children without reinforcing stereotypes or inequities. Would you like to examine my breast milk? I asked again, my voice dripping with sarcasm, but I didn't need an answer. She ignored me, of course. That silence, the audacity of her indifference, boiled something deep inside me. The sound of my own anger, sharp and raw, was the only thing grounding me in that moment. Ms. Brown didn't flinch. She didn't look up. She just scribbled something on her clipboard, detached and smug, like I wasn't even human. My hand gripped the freezer door so hard my knuckles turned white. I knew I was sinking into my lower self, letting this rage consume me. But after 2 years of this, 2 years of being judged, watched, poked, and prodded, I was done. Done trying to prove myself to people who had already made up their minds. I wasn't the mother they wanted to save. I was the villain they were waiting to catch. Not trying to stop abuse, but waiting to see it happen. And in their waiting, their accusations, their endless questioning, they were the ones abusing us. I'm done seeing everything I need to see down here, as there isn't much, she said, her words dripping with condescension. It took everything in me to hold my composure, to swallow the anger clawing its way up my throat. I didn't say a word. No, she wasn't worth it. Instead, I turned and walked quickly up the stairs, my footsteps purposeful, each one a silent rebellion. I knew my pace was too fast for her, a reminder of how out of shape and bitter she was. Keep up, bitch, I thought, the words burning in my mind like a secret weapon. My silence was louder than anything I could have said. Upstairs, my twins were fast asleep in their separate cribs. Zenobia, who is 5 and 3-year-old Zainif, were already under the covers when we walked in. Their giggles floated out, but I could hear the unease beneath them. Dear Diary, today was a test of patience, resilience, and the fine art of not completely losing it in the face of chaos. Zachariah breezed into the room like he wasn't part of the problem, flashing his easy smile and throwing around his charm like currency. Miss Brown ate it up, her professionalism cracking just enough to remind me how quickly people fall for appearances. But charm doesn't raise kids, and it sure doesn't clean up the mess left behind when reality crashes down. This journey with CPS has been grueling, a constant dance of proving my worth while quietly enduring the judgment. For anyone walking this same tightrope, let me say this: you are not alone. The system may feel stacked against you, the odds insurmountable, but you have more strength than you know. Whether they're digging through your fridge or questioning your choices, remember this: their clipboard doesn't define your love or your sacrifice. As for me, I'm still standing, scarred but unbroken, carrying the weight of this battle because my story deserves to be told. To those who've walked with me on this journey, thank you from the depths of my heart. But this is just the beginning. Stay tuned for part 3, because the truth only grows sharper and the lessons cut deeper. And if you've felt even a fraction of what I've shared, don't let go now. My new book drops early next year, a story raw, real, and unforgettable. This isn't just my fight, it's a movement. Let's finish what we've started together.